Cardinal, a Batfam Podfic written and illustrated by the Royal Librarian and read by Heo Stories. Chapter 10. Dinner. Over the next week, Damian takes active steps to recoup some goodwill between himself and Drake. He didn't really know what to expect coming in on Monday, between their spat on Friday and Drake's apparent drugging on Saturday gala. But when he arrives, Drake is already there early, acting just the same as always. He doesn't mention their disagreement, nor his interaction with his brothers. It's like he's pretending it never happened. A tactic Damien is far too used to, both implementing himself and dealing with from the family. So Damien goes along with it and tries to be on his best behavior. Admittedly, that doesn't even last the entire day. Before Tam left, she told him that being bored with Drake would probably do more good for their relationship than anything else. After Friday, Damien thought for certain she was wrong and that he should, in fact, increase his professionalism to gain Drake's confidence. But at 3 p.m., Damien comes into Drake's office with a couple things for him to sign and finds him slumped against his desk, head resting in one hand, fast asleep. And something inside Damien snaps. Despite Drake's consistent personality shifts, Damien is confident that falling asleep at his desk is extremely out of character for him. He cares too much about the work. Damien isn't sure if it's from the event over the weekend, Drake coming in earlier than scheduled, or just his obvious lack of self-preservation skills, but the man is clearly exhausted. And if Drake can't take care of himself properly, logically, as his assistant, the job must fall to Damian. Damian storms up to his desk and slams the files down as loudly as the papers will allow. Drake immediately shoots awake, eyes wild for a second, before he takes in his surroundings, relaxing upon seeing Damian. He shakes his head as if taking himself into awareness. Sorry about that. You need something? No, but you need to rest, Damien states. Drake blinks slowly, sleep still clinging to him. What? You are exhausted. You came in 2 hours ahead of schedule this morning. You can't take 2 hours to recoup some sleep. Damien goes around the desk up to his side and grabs his arm, pulling him to his feet. Drake stumbles after him. Damien's grip is unrelenting. Drake doesn't even put up much of a fight, though that's probably more to do with the shock. It only takes a couple of seconds for Damian to get him across the room and dumps him onto the couch. That seems to startle him. What? Damian, I can't just take a nap in the middle of the workday. What exactly would you call what you are just doing? I didn't mean to. And yet you did, meaning your body is under undue stress and you cannot be expected to perform at peak efficiency in your state. Damien goes back to Drake's desk and grabs his laptop. Therefore, I will cover your menial task, of which I know I am completely capable, and you will lie on that couch and shut your eyes. 2 hours, Drake. Damien sits himself in the lounge chair, facing the couch across from the coffee table, opening the laptop and getting straight to work. If Drake knows what's good for him, he won't argue. A few seconds pass, but Drake still doesn't move to lie down. Damien glares at him. Were my instructions not clear? And Drake? Drake gets this incredibly fond expression in his eyes, his lips curving upwards into perhaps the most authentic smile he's seen from him yet. Drake raises his hands in surrender and settles himself down on his side. In just a few minutes, he's out like a light. From then on, Damien doesn't even try to censor himself. He's still completely professional in front of others or when communicating on behalf of Drake Industries. But when it's just him and Drake, Damien is brutally honest and blunt, just as he is in every other part of his life besides the public. He doesn't mince words, and he doesn't try to appeal to what he thinks Drake wants to hear. Drake, for his part, seems relieved, and quickly adapts to the change. They settle back into the rapport they had started to build at the beginning. Damian starts asking questions constantly, eager to soak up every bit of information he can, and Drake answers every single one. They work better now than ever. Drake still puts up his facade from time to time, going oddly cold for no discernible reason, but Damien decidedly doesn't react to it. He reins in his annoyed glances and frustrated sighs and just accepts it best he can. It's only been a week of this shifted dynamic. Damien still knows Drake's trust won't come all at once, but still, he hopes in time that he will drop the act completely. After the gala, Duke and Jason debriefed the family on the events leading up and following Drake being drugged. Although they both refused to repeat what he said, it was clear Drake had defended Damien against one of his own people. Even in his drug-hazed state, Drake stood up for him. Damien still doesn't know how to feel about that. It invokes such complicated emotions in him that he doesn't understand. He should be grateful. He is grateful, but he also feels guilty. Like he hasn't earned any such kindness from Drake. Even though he's never wronged Drake, at least not that he's aware of. He can't shake the feeling that he needs to make up for something. Hence his new dedication to making sure Drake takes care of himself. What's even stranger is that Damien isn't the only one who feels this way. Following the events at the gala, the entire family's interest has spiked. In an unlikely turn of events, Jason is now as much invested into the Timothy Drake mystery as Damien himself. He's been coming up with one outlandish theory after another to explain the inconsistencies in his character and behavior. His current theory is that Drake is a meta. Think about it, Jason insists one night. Barbary said he isolates himself, a fact I can confirm from that empty ass mansion. He's all by himself, insisting it's for the best. He has internalized metaphobia or some shit. Damien cocks his head consideringly. It would explain why he's desperate to blend in with the crowd. But why would he have, and I quote, metaphobia? Duke asks skeptically. First, I've done my homework, and his parents were terrible. Jason starts. I bet it's something they taught him, that he's got to hide his powers to be normal or something. Secondly, he lives in Gotham, a place known for Batman's no meta rule. With exceptions, Dick inputs, bumping Duke playfully. Yeah, well, not everyone is lucky enough to get the okay from the Bat himself, Jason mutters. Bruce looks up from his work across the cave where he's been pretending not to listen to the conversation. Are you trying to say this is my fault? I'm not trying to say anything, Jason deadpans. I am, in fact, saying it. Damien shakes his head fondly at their banter, knowing there is no real heat behind it. While there are some merits to the meta theory, nobody is willing to put much stock into it without more proof. Or, at the very least, they all agree that Timothy is in desperate need of connection, and they are all determined to help. And so begins the first steps of their newly minted plan. Make friends with Timothy Drake. Drake is a pretty private person, so the only way for Damien's brothers to directly involve themselves is to either approach Drake at the occasional public event or make up reasons to see him, the easiest of which is through Damien himself. And so every day, one of his brothers starts showing up at Drake Industries under one excuse or another. The first time, Jason comes in under the pretense of giving Damien his lunch. He gives the office door a quick knock before coming in. When Drake realizes who it is, he looks probably panicked. He quickly hides his unease, though, and answers Jason's questions about how he's been feeling calmly enough, though it's not enough to have either Jason or Damien fooled. The next time, it's Dick coming to pick Damian up, and his interaction with Drake is halted and awkward to say the least. Drake is in the middle of something when Dick just waltzes in without as much as a knock. Timothy was clearly expecting Damian, so when he looks up, his heart startled shouldn't be as surprising as it is to Damian. Mr. Grayson? Drake says, turning professional in an instant, though Damian can see the faint tightness around his eyes. Dick offers a small smile. I am just here to pick up Damian. Ah, Drake nods, but doesn't say anything further. Dick pauses, his eyes scanning Drake's face curiously, like he's looking for something. The silence stretches between them, and Damien can't see the tension in Drake steadily rising, his shoulders stiffening and his fingers curling into a loose fist at his side. I don't know if you remember, Dick finally starts again, but we've met a few times before when you were younger. Drake swallows. I remember, he says simply, but more strained than the situation has any reason for. Dick hums, staring. Feels like a lifetime ago. Drake tightens his jaw and just nods. It does. There's another brief silence, thick and uncomfortable. Wait for reasons Damien doesn't understand, and it doesn't seem like Dick does either. Damien steps forward, breaking this odd standoff. We should get going, Richard. Of course. Dick shakes his head, almost like he's shaking himself from some sort of trance. It was good to see you, Timothy. Drake just gives a single polite nod. Likewise. Dick and Damien both agree that the whole interaction was just weird. To Damien's more trained eye, Drake just looked sad. Damien has never so desperately wished his sisters were here to intervene. Damien thinks Drake would actively get along with Cass, Steph, and even Barbara, probably more than his brothers anyway. After a week of this, with every small interaction, Drake steadily grows more prepared for them and thus more able to deflect any attempts of connection. And so, Damien goes against his better judgment. The Waynes decide to step up. It's Friday evening, just a week after Damien stormed out of the office, burning with fury. A lot really can happen in a week. Damien packs his things at his desk slowly, eyes flickering over towards the elevator now and then. His phone chimes. On the way up, the text reads. Damien nods to himself and slips into Drake's office, where he's still hunched over his computer. That isn't due until next Wednesday, Damien reminds him. Drake smirks, not looking up. You know there's something to be said about getting ahead on your work. And there's something to be said about going home on time. Resting. Not that you're familiar with the concept. Drake rolls his eyes. You don't want to talk, he murmurs, barely audible. But Damien still catches it. You got any plans for the weekend? Drake asks before Damien can comment. No, especially. Damien replies casual. You? Drake huffs. You know my schedule better than I do. Damien smirks. Indeed. There's a knock at the door and it swings open, revealing both Dick and Jason. Drake's expression immediately smooths over, erasing any hint of himself that was just a moment ago. Hey, little D, Dick greets, ruffling Damien's perfectly styled hair. Damien pushes him away. Get off, Richard! Dick just laughs while Damien gives him a vicious glare. I hope a little demon of a brother isn't giving you too much trouble, Drake. Jason jokes. Drake looks up from his laptop. No, of course not. Damien's very helpful, he says monotone. Jason frowns. Damien? Helpful? That doesn't sound right. I will stab you, Damien gripes, momentarily forgetting himself. But Drake's lips quirk up for just a second before he tries to ignore them again by going back to work. His brothers trade victorious glances. Jason pushes himself forward, leaning his elbows on the desk and getting into Drake's space. So, Timothy, may I call you Timothy? We're gonna head back to Bristol and have dinner together at Wayne Manor. We try to get together every week. You in? Drake blinks at him, baffled. What? Dick steps closer. We liked you to come to dinner. Damien told so much about you, and it's kind of weird we know so little about our little next door neighbor. And it's not like you have anybody to come home to anyway. Jason jokes a little harshly. Drake's face blue screens and reboots at least twice before he responds. That's very kind of you. I appreciate the offer. Unfortunately, I have more work that. No, you don't. Damien cuts him off, knowing exactly what he'd say. Damien nods towards his computer. Not due until Wednesday, remember? Drake glares at him. Properly glares, but it only makes Damien more smug. In fact, your entire weekend is clear. Drake opens his mouth, but Damien shuts him up off again. Like you said, I know your schedule better than you do. Dick claps his hands together. Well, settle. We parked down in the parking garage. I assume you did too? He asks, and Damien collects Drake's few personal items and puts them into his bag. Jason pulls Drake's chair out from by the desk, while Dick puts him to his feet. Damien hands him the bag, and just like that, they're ushering him out the door. What's happening? He mutters almost to himself as his brothers push him into the elevator. You're coming to dinner, Damien tells him sternly. The elevator closes and the four of them descend down into the parking level. Drake is tense, his entire body drawn in, trying to make himself as small as possible and avoid any sort of contact. Damon looks over his shoulder at Dick and gives him a significant look, doing a couple of hand signs where Drake can't see. Target fleeing, he signs confidently. Damien doesn't know how, but he knows as soon as they get into their cars, Drake is going to split off and go anywhere but the manor. Dick nods once, signing back, we'll handle. The elevator opens and Dick steps out. Tim waits a moment for Damien to step out next, then follows, allowing Jason to take the rear. Damien blinks. It had to be coincidence. Drake naturally fell into their standard formation, right? Drake points across the way towards the opposite end of the garage for Fisto parking. I'm just there, he says with a small wave. Damien hits Dick with his elbow. Oh, would you mind if I drove with you? I can show you where it's best to park on the manor grounds. It can be tricky the first time. Dick tells him. It's a weak lie, but not one Drake can really argue with. He shuts his eyes for a long second, almost like he's gathering patience, then purses his lips and nods. Alright. Drake practically skips over to him and gives him a big wave towards Jason and Damien. See you over there, he yells. Jason huffs. That was either the best or worst thing they could have done to get him to like us. Better than sending you with him. Jason slaps him up the head. Todd! Tim does his best not to fidget, keeping his eyes squarely on the road, all but completely ignoring the fact that Dick is there at all. These last few days have been different. Ever since the gala and Tim's extremely unfortunate lack of drug tolerance, there has been an uptick in Wayne's siblings visiting his office. And now this? Surely I don't think they're being subtle. God, he knows why they'd even wanted to spend time with him willingly. Probably because of what he did under such drug influence. The night is a bit foggy, especially towards the end, but Tim remembers enough to get the basics. He went to bat for Damien, right there where anybody, Duke and Jason, could hear him. He even let the brothers take him home. God, he hopes he didn't say or do anything too revealing. At the very least, they probably saw the inside of his house. Between that and Oracle snooping in on him, they can probably see how scheduled he is, and in true bad fashion decide they needed to fix it. He's been so sloppy. The whole point of the persona was so that they wouldn't want anything to do with him. But just a few weeks, and Damien's boss has them at all going down the drain. He defended Damien, and now they think they need to repay him? Of some sort of pity friendship? Better yet, Bruce probably heard more about the poor orphan kid next door with black hair and blue eyes and decided he needed to intervene. But there's nothing to be done about it. For better or worse, Tim is officially one on the Wayne's radar. That's alright, that's fine. He simply has to prove them wrong. They want him to come to dinner? Fine. He'll prove their assumptions are just that. He is, in fact, perfectly happy as he is, and does not want nor need any intervention. He will calm their concerns and they'll move on. Unfortunately, that means being a bit more true to his real nature. By now, Damien has seen enough of his true personality. He can't afford to be a cold-hearted asshole there. That would only raise more alarm bells. But he can be friendly enough, happy, polite, and honest when he knows he's being scrutinized. He's made his bed, and he can lie in it. Tim isn't naive, though. He recognizes that a family dinner may not be the best thing for his mental health, but he's always been good at compartmentalism. He can manage one night without getting overwhelmed. He'll be fine. Everything is fine. Maybe if he keeps thinking it, it will become true. It's about a 20-minute drive from Drake Industries back to Wayne Manor, at non-Batmobile speeds anyway. Damien is uncharacteristically fidgety the whole way. What's good use on that? Jason asks. Damien bites back an immediate denial of any such thing. It would be a pointless lie. I'm not sure, he admits. I want him to trust me. Us. Trust takes time, Jason reminds him, and don't forget it goes both ways. Damien ponders on that the remaining drive. Within a few minutes, they pull into Wayne Manor's long driveway. Drake parks his car on the west end, where they usually direct guests to while Jason pulls into the interior garage. Damien is hopping out of the car before it's even fully in park, hurrying inside towards the kitchen area. Ah, Master Damien, Alfred greets them. I assume Master Timothy has agreed to join us tonight? Not so much agreed as was coerced, Jason answers, coming up behind Damien. Alfred gives them a hard look. I do hope you mind your manners. Of course. It's us you're talking about, Alfie. Jason smiles. Alfred sighs. Where is the young sir then? He should be coming in the front with Dick. We should go eat him then. Bruce chimes in as he passes by the kitchen doorway, already on his way. Damien and Jason make eye contact and rush after him. Duke is already in the entry hall, freshly showered from his patrol. Bruce is dressed about as casual as Bruce Wayne ever does, in comfortable slacks and a button-up white shirt. Damien quickly sheds his own blazer and hangs it up with the other coats. Remember what I told you, Damien says seriously, pointing at each of them. Drake responds well to authenticity. If you're fake, he will be too. That being said, behave yourselves. Drake is an only child, and this family is mad enough on a good day. Don't overwhelm the latchkey child, got it? Jason smirks. Damien glares at him warningly. There's a quick knock at the door, and Dick opens it from the outside, pushing Drake in first. Welcome to Wayne Manor, Dick says with a flourish. Damon quickly takes in Drake's stance. He's definitely on guard. His body language is open, seemingly relaxed, but Damien knows better now. His eyes are too tight, his expression too demure for him to be truly at ease. Father approached him first, holding out a hand. I believe we've met before, but it's nice to see you outside the limelight, he says, his voice somewhere between his natural timbre and his Brucey Way's voice. A compromise of sorts. Drake shakes his hand. Good to see you too, Mr. Wayne. Call me Bruce, please. Drake smirks, a bit of his hidden snark creeping into his voice. Of course, Mr. Wayne. Damon rolls his eyes, fond despite himself. Bruce just chuckles, unbothered. You've met my son, Jason, of course. He motions to his tallest son. Drake gives him an awkward nod, like he doesn't know what approach is best to take with him. And I believe you've been introduced to Duke as well. Drake clears his throat. Yes, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Thank you both again for helping me home the other night, he says to both of them. His manners perfect, his tone giving nothing away. Jason shrugs. It's hardly the first time I've had to drag a delirious socialite back to Bristol. Bruce gives him a look from behind Drake, but Drake's lips just twitch unoffended, almost like he's in on the joke. I can only imagine, Drake deadpans. Duke covers his mouth and coughs, holding back a laugh. Might I take your suit jacket, sir? Alfred says as he enters the hall. Drake freezes, his whole body much more stiff than it was a moment ago. He turns to face Alfred, his face completely devoid of emotion except for his eyes. Damian is reminded for the first time he spoke to Drake at the gala. The split second of pure emotion he glimpsed in his eyes, before it was gone again. Seeing it now almost feels like a deja vu. That's all right, Tim says softly. I'll keep it on. As you wish, Master Timothy. Tim. He suddenly stutters, his mask fracturing for a second, his eyes widen slightly, like he's surprised at his own word. I go by Tim. Would you like to follow me into the dining room then, Master Tim? Tim nods, and together they all follow Alfred deeper into the house. The dining room is set with a less formal dishware, though it still has the effect of being both chic and cozy. The food is already set out on the table. Bruce takes his usual spot at the head of the table, and the others follow suit. They don't exactly have a seating chart, but they're all creatures of habit, each with their own preferred spot. Typically, Bruce sits at the head with Dick on his right and Damien on his left. Duke sits next to Damien, and Jason across from Duke. Cass sits next to Jason, and Steph across from her, besides Duke. When Barbara comes, she sits her wheelchair at the far end of the table at the other head, facing Bruce. Tim watches them all as they all start to find their seats and linger awkwardly by the doorway, like he's unsure where he's supposed to go. Duke notices as much, and right before he sits, he scoots down a chair, motioning for Tim to sit where he normally does, beside Damien and across from Jason. Tim swallows, but nods gratefully and takes the seat. So, Tim, Bruce starts, and they all begin to fill their plates. Damien has been telling me about Drake Industries. I understand one of your supplies recently rubbed out on you. Yeah, they did. Tim sighs. It was a bit chaotic there for a second, but I think we've got everything under control again. Tim and Bruce go back and forth for a while, talking purely business. They go over recent events and how their companies have been addressing them. They discuss how beneficial the partnership between DI and WE has been for Gotham and brainstorm new ideas going forward. Since Tim works almost exclusively with Lucius, the two business owners have never sat down directly to speak to one another. The public doesn't view Bruce as any sort of real authority over Wayne Enterprises, merely the owner. Most don't realize how involved he truly is. Some people might say the same about Tim. But if Tim is surprised at Bruce following along the conversation so well, he doesn't show it. The conversation seems to help Tim relax, looking less and less like he's about to bolt with every minute. Eventually, though, the rest of the family gets bored with the topic. Jason intervenes first. So, Timberine, how's it really been working with Damien? He leans in. And you can be honest. Damien glares across the table at his brother's just smirk. Tim raises an eyebrow at the nickname but doesn't comment. I mean what I said earlier. Damien's doing very well. Tim responds, sounding truthful. He certainly lasted longer than I thought he would, Jason snarks. Damien steps at his dinner a bit too harshly. What's that supposed to mean, Todd? Boys, Bruce intervenes before a fight can break out. Tim smiles a bit. Damien isn't meant for assistantship, that's for sure. Anyone can see he's meant for bigger things, but he's hardworking and does the job. It was an adjustment on my part in the beginning, but I think we're doing alright now. We are, Damien agrees. Damien mentioned you're quite close with your usual assistant, Bruce comments. Tamara, yes, she's fantastic. Knowing how indispensable Mr. Fox has become to me and WE, I can only imagine. Tim nods enthusiastically. It's true, I was lucky she came on when she did. I was still figuring things out by then. It probably would have self imploded if she didn't keep me off course. That tracks, Damien mutters. Duke snorts. Tim gives Damien the side eye but doesn't comment. I understand you took over your family's business quite young, Dick poses, taking a sip from his drink. Drake nods once. I did, he says simply, his face deceptively open, though Damien thinks he catches a hint of bemusement, which is fair. It is common knowledge Drake is one of the youngest CEOs of all time, which then begs the question of what Dick is fishing for. I guess I'm just curious, Dick explains. Did you always know that the eye was what you wanted to do with your life? Tim looks down at his foot, a slight crease in his brow. No, he finally answers. No, I didn't think this was what I would do. Then why did you? Duke asks carefully, noticing the shift in tone. Tim ponders the questions, subconsciously chewing at the side of his lip. Damon recognizes this as a nervous habit of his, though he's never actually seen Tim do it before. How did he know that? My parents' company was not well managed, Tim says plainly, distracting Damien from his thoughts. Had I not stepped in, it would have gone under. I could have let that happen. I've plenty of inheritance without it, but it seemed like such a waste. Waste? Bruce encourages. Damien watches him curiously, wondering if Drake has finally been honest about something for once. Wasted potential, Tim decides. I knew it could be better than it was, and I knew I could make that happen. How could I waste an opportunity to do so much? He swallows. To make a bit of a difference, he says almost to himself. Damien smiles a bit. It isn't an all out confession, but it's more than Damien has ever managed to get out of him. And Damien knows that his family sees it too. Beneath the flowery words, Tim legitimately cares. It's the exact mindset that each of them carry as vigilantes. If any of them have the chance to make someone's life that much better, even at the risk of their own, how can they not take the chance? That's pretty noble of you, Jason smirks as he leans back in his chair, a playful glint in his eye. You know, for a rich boy. Bruce sends him a warning glance, but Tim just huffs, amused. Out of the two of us, who's the son of the wealthiest man in the world? Ooh, Duke goes, mockingly drawing out the word. He's got you there. That has never been confirmed, Jason defends. Bruce, Dick glances at him for confirmation, his brow raised expectantly. Bruce looks back and forth between the two sides of the table, his mouth opening and closing like he's searching for a diplomatic response. I can neither confirm nor deny. Duke laughs, so that's a yes. The tension breaks as a chuckle ripples around the table. Even Jason shakes his head good-naturedly, shrugging as if to say, fair enough. So, what would you have done then? Dick asked him, leaning forward curiously, going back to the original subject. If you didn't take over when you did, what would you have wanted to be? Tim smiles a bit wistfully. I should have been a great many things. Jason practically chokes on his food, coughing and waving his hand. I'm sorry, did you just call a little woman at me? Tim's eyes light up mischievously. He looks Jason straight in the eye, suddenly very intense, and asks, Do you know it? Jason's mouth drops for a bit. Every word? Tim exclaims loudly, dropping the intensity as quickly as he put it on. He points at Jason, grinning like he's just proved the point. You just quoted Shakespeare in Love. What? You? I did not. You did. Mom, how would you even know that if you haven't seen it? Tim shrugs cheekily. I know. It's a mystery. You. Jason bites back his tongue, knowing any comment on that would give him away. Tim scoffs playfully. Oh, come on, you fessed up to liking Louisa May Alcott, but you can't admit to liking a rom-com. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jason insists, keeping his face completely blank, a red flag to anyone that knows him that he's lying. Yes, you do, Dick declares, laughing. Dickie, don't you dare! Dick leans in towards Tim as if imparting a secret. It's one of his favorite movies, actually, he whispers conspiringly. Jason stands up so fast, his chair falls behind him. Damn it, Dick! Dick jumps up just as fast, hands raised in mock defense, ready to block Jason's blows. No fighting at the table, fighting in shoes. Neither of them would ever risk actually sparring in the middle of the dining room, their civilian guests notwithstanding. They're far more afraid of risking Alfred's wrath. Still, the brothers trade a few mock blows, Jason aiming for a particularly ticklish spot on Tig's torso they all know he's especially sensitive to. Stop that! That's not even for you. Dick struggles, managing to push him off and wrangle his younger brother into a headlock. There! How do you like that? Dick mocks. You're literally the worst, Jason bites back. Bruce shakes his head at their antics and stands, practically scruffing both boys by their neck, separating and manhandling them back into their seats, just as Alfred enters the room at the sound of their commotion. He raises a very unimpressed eyebrow at the two of them, and they immediately look down, sheepish. Damian rolls his eyes fondly. The fight, if it could even be called that, was tame compared to what they're all capable of, but it was still rough in a way Damien has learned is fairly normal amongst brothers. Damien chances a glance at Tim to see his reaction to such tomfoolery, only Tim's eyes are glassy, almost vacant, like he's somewhere else entirely. Damien frowns, the light mood draining from him in an instant. Tim? Tim blinks quickly, as if startled back into the present, and suddenly stands, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sorry, could I use the restroom? Ah, oh, of course, must Tim? Alfred replies easily. I can show you. It's fine, Alfred, I got it. He assures and rushes out the room, his footsteps hurried and uneven, echoing down the hallway, going far further than necessary for the nearest bathroom. They look at each other in stunned silence. What just happened? Dick asks first, his brow creased in concern. I don't know, Duke murmurs, frowning. He looks towards the door Tim disappeared through. Things were going well, weren't they? You idiot scared him off, Damien growls, pushing his chair back sharply. You told us to be ourselves. Jason shoots back. I guess that was my mistake, he hisses. Alfred steps close to the table. You can argue later, he says sternly. Right now, we have a compromised guest probably lost in the manor. Damian stands, his jaw tight, fist clenched at his side. I'll find him. He doesn't wait for an agreement or protest. Mally gets up and goes. Timothy is his responsibility, so he'll take care of it. Drake isn't in the guest bathroom, because of course he isn't. Damien scours the bottom floor of the manor, knowing it's unlikely Drake would venture too far. When he doesn't find him in the most obvious places, Damien goes towards the less used parts of the east wing. Think perhaps Drake took a wrong turn. Damien enters a dimly lit hallway, and sure enough, there's a door at the end of the hallway that's half open, letting light floods out into the hallway corridor. Damon gazes at it curiously, realizing just which door he's looking at. It's a restroom, but it's behind a false wall panel, making it near impossible to find if you don't know what you're looking for. How did how did Tim know it was there? Damien steps forward silently, his ear picking up the quiet sound of Drake's voice as he gets closer, and something else. Damien spots just a few feet away and simply listens, hearing what almost sounds like licking? All right, that's enough, Tim says, and Damien finally places the sound. That's Titus. Titus gives a very unhappy grumble, a sound so distinct Damien would know it anywhere. He freezes, panicked for a split second. Titus is supposed to be locked away in his kennel right now. The dog is extremely loyal, but to a fault. It takes him a long time to warm up to people, so whenever they have guests, they have to keep him away or risk the dog biting someone. How the hell are you so big anyway? Tim says fondly. Damien barely making out the sound of him petting the Great Dane. Damien can do nothing but stand there with his mouth agape, because he's never seen Titus take an instant liking to somebody ever. But apparently he likes Tim. Tim laughs softly, an honest laugh Damien has never, if rarely, if ever heard. Have you been a good boy, Titus? Tim whispers warmly. Damien stumbles back. In his shock, Damien fails to muffle the sound of his footsteps, and Tim instantly goes quiet. Damien sighs to himself and cuts his losses, stepping fully into the doorway so Tim can see him. Drake is sitting on the floor with Titus settled determinedly in his lap as he gives the dog scratches behind his ear. I see you've met Titus, Damien says, as neutrally as he can, leaning casually against the doorway. Tim swallows and simply nods, his face going back to that old distant expression he uses at his most defensive. Are you alright? Damon asks. The words feel clumsy in his mouth, awkward, uncertain. He isn't good at the whole emotional vulnerability thing. The whole family struggles with it, though therapy does help. If Drake doesn't have a therapist, he certainly needs one. Tim gently pushes Titus off his lap, ignoring the unhappy woof that earns him. Tim rises slowly, brushing invisible dust from his pants. He clears his throat. Honestly, I don't think I'm feeling super well. I should get home, Drake says in a flat, neutral tone. Damien swallows. There it is again, that twisting pull in his gut, the instinct that something is wrong, deeply wrong, even with all the, quite frankly, the strange behavior from Drake lately. Something in Damien is screaming at him to make him stay, to do something, anything. But despite what his old brothers might think, you can't exactly force him to do something he doesn't want to. I see. Damien does his best to match his tone. I'm sure the others will want to say goodbye. No, the words comes out a little too loud, a little too quick. Tim flinches, then takes a breath, resetting himself, and starts again in the same monotone as before. That is, I think it's best if I just go. Damian stares at him, trying with all his might to see beyond the mask. There's something buried in those eyes, something old and exhausted and hurt, like the aftermath of a fire no one knew had been burning. Damien is so confused at Drake's behavior, his apparent knowledge of their family, the bubbling emotions inside of him that have no reason to be there. Something is going on, and he wants answers, desperately. But he won't get them, at least not tonight. Damien sighs, long and low. I'll walk you out, he allows. Drake doesn't respond, but his eyes flick to Damien's, and for just a few seconds, they're soft, grateful, apologetic. Neither speaks as Damien escorts him through the manor. The silence isn't awkward, but it's heavy. They walk side by side through the twists and turns. Tim doesn't hesitate or falter once, and Damien can't shake the feeling Drake knows the way just as well as he does. When they reach the grand entryway again, Damien can't take it anymore. He turns to him abruptly. Timothy, I. He hesitates when he sees Tim's face flinch just a bit. Drake, he admits, pushing for onward. I'm sorry if this was too much. My family can be insistent. Tim shakes his head adamantly. No, Damien, no, it's just boss. He looks away, blinking his eyes rapidly again. I enjoyed every second of it, but I have to go now. All right, Damien allows. I will see you on Monday. He means for it to be a statement, but it comes more out like a question. Drake nods. Of course, I'll see you Monday. He turns and rushes out the door, the brisk air sweeping through the entryway as the door slams shut behind him, leaving Damien standing there with more conflicted feelings than he knows what to deal with. And we have reached double digits. Another two and we'll be halfway done. Not with the amount of words, but well, um, amount of chapters. As I said before, the chapters slowly start getting longer. Um, I don't have memorized, but it wouldn't surprise me if we break the 1 hour mark fairly soon. No musical flashback, but if I remember right, I did not remember right. At some point, I think one chapter starts with one, but I know. Um, I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and I'll see you next week or tomorrow. Still in my system to say next week always. Bye.